3 new amp knobs, you just heard them. All of them are EVH, or PV if you will, and I admit in this mix I made them sound quite similar. But I'm gonna load them and show you the differences. Let's start with the 5169! It emulates the block letter 5150. It's probably as iconic as a metal amp gets, I suppose, together with the dual recto maybe. So let's hear how it sounds with this guitar and the stock settings. I didn't change anything. Sounds good. I think the gain could be higher because all my guitars have passive pickups and they're a little bit quiet. So there are two ways you could go about this. You could obviously use the gain knob, that's here for that, because you don't get much else anyway. Or you can boost the input here. And with many amp sims, this would be the same thing, but here it isn't. Because the gain here is actually modeled after the real amp and it behaves differently. So if I just boost the input, I'll get more distortion, I'll get more gain. That's about it. That's how most amp sims that I know usually work. But if you change the gain here, because it's actually acting like a real amp, the feeling will change because the response will change. The dynamics and the frequency response itself may change. The way it's gonna distort changes. Something I do often if I want to change the feeling of an amp like that is to compensate by, for instance, turning down the gain but turning up the input. So let's do this here and you'll hear that you get less of the lows and more of the highs, making for a thinner but tighter sound with really defined palm mute. Not enough gain for me, I think. But in comparison, if I just bring this back to 0 and I boost the gain, if I push it really hard, you'll get a much fuzzier sound with more of the lows going into the tubes. And of course you get a pedal for that modern tightness. That sounds more like me. It's getting dark in here, I had to change the settings. If you want an even more brutal, modern, tight sound with lots of twang and anger, you can go for the 6606 instead. It emulates a 6505 and I think right now it's my favorite for rhythms. Again, I like to push it pretty hard. Let's use a different guitar. Oh, dude. That's tone! A tiny detail I like about this one is when you turn off the bypass, it's not only the LEDs here that turn off, it's also the light of the tubes behind. I kinda like it. You can also set the output level of the plugin to make sure it's at a decent volume without clipping. And last but not least, the BDH3, which I think is the most modern of all three. It's a bit flatter, but it extends further into the high end and low end. And it's my favorite for leads because it has a really warm gain with a lot of the low mids pushing through the tubes. If you do push it, which I'm going to do right now. I like when the sound is almost fuzzy for doing this kind of lead line. I'm going to go in the settings and turn on the gate. I like a lot of gain on my leads, especially in metal contexts where everything's super loud. I like to sometimes be able to pick quietly and fluidly in order to go really fast and still have all the fundamentals being really loud and audible through a mix. I'm just gonna add a delay, and I think we got ourselves a lead tone already. I like that. Since I went for the gate, let's check out the other basic features of the plugin. You got a little tuning fork right here, and yeah, you guess what it is, a tuner, which lets you also playing different tunings if you're a weirdo. Right next to it, you can turn off the cab if you want, like you could in the previous AmpKnob. But also you can load a custom IR directly into the plugin, which is something I've been waiting for. I'm gonna make the response even wider with this. Full spectrum, baby. Next you get the settings, which is where I found the gates. If you go in preferences, you can set the input to be stereo, which is very useful if you're mixing hard pan rhythm guitars and you just want the same sound on both of them. Instead of loading two separate instances of the plugin and then every time you make a change, you have to copy the settings over and over. You can run both hard pan guitars into one bus and have the plugin into a bus, and that's it. You have your stereo rhythm guitars with the same sound that you can adjust on both guitars at once. Right below it is a setting for the quality of the digital signal processing, which is very useful if your PC has poor performance and or the session you're working on has a lot of plugins, a lot of stuff going on, and the computer is struggling a little bit. You can lower the quality of the signal processing, but honestly, I cannot hear a difference at all. I didn't set it to be normal by default because I never had a performance problem in any session where I used these amps. But honestly, you can totally work on your guitars with the normal setting. And if you export your song, it will automatically go back to the highest quality. Next is the noise gate, which I activated earlier with a threshold setting if you want to only cut the noise and keep a really dynamic tone. Or you want it to gent like fuck. Then there's a link to the website, there's your license info, and some info on the version of the plugin you're using in case you need it for support or whatever else. But wait, there's more! I've only shown you the features in the plugin versions of these amps, which assumes you're already using a recording software like Logic Pro, Reaper, etc. But if you would prefer to use an amp sim as a single standalone software, as if it was just a real amp that you turn on, you get some sound and that's it, there is a standalone version. You click on an icon on your desktop and you get the amp, and that's it. And you can see it has a few more features. Right next to the tuning fork, there's a metronome. So like this. You can change the tempo, you can tap it if you want. You can change the sound, the volume in comparison with your guitar, the subdivision, the number of beats, and I think the most advanced practice feature is you can increase the speed of the metronome by however many BPM you want, every how many bars you want. So you can practice an exercise, but every time you've played it over 8 bars, it becomes 5 BPM faster. If you don't have that in a software, you don't even have to program anything. Very convenient for practice. And the last feature is the recording feature. If you were practicing or just jamming with the amp software, but you found a really sick riff while playing, instead of having to like reach for your phone, go for a nap, whatever, or open a recording software and then set it up and then load the plugin instead and then record here, you can literally just hit record here. It will give you a dialog to change the name of your recording. And your riff will be saved in a folder that you can access by just clicking once here. That's it, you get your sick riff. Alright, that's it. Thank you for sticking with me with this presentation. If you'd be interested in me explaining how I mixed the demo song and how I used these plugins and how I mixed everything else, let me know. I'm thinking of doing a video if I can, if I have the time to. Until then, have fun!